The world outside is dissolving. It's not just rain. It's a static interference pattern washing over the glass, turning the city lights into bleeding ulcers of neon red and sodium yellow. You are sitting in a tin box that smells faintly of unburnt hydrocarbons and cheap adhesive. You are stationary, but the vibration in the seat tells you something is alive, thrashing quietly beneath the hood. Most cars hum. They strive for a seamless, appliance-like anonymity, desperate to make you forget they are machines exploding dinosaurs to create motion. But not this one. This one shudders. It has a heartbeat, irregular and syncopated, a rhythmic limp that enthusiasts mistake for a soul. You grip the wheel-hard plastic, cold to the touch, and you wait. You aren't going anywhere in particular. That's the point. You are here for the solitude that only a loud machine can provide. The cabin is not a sanctuary of luxury. It is a testament to the switches feel brittle. The upholstery pattern looks like it was rejected from a bowling alley in 1993. Subaru didn't design this space to coddle you. They designed a farm implement, a tool for moving people across difficult terrain. And then, almost by accident, they gave it too much power. You are sitting in a contradiction, a chassis built for grocery runs, powered by an engine layout borrowed from aircraft, vibrating with the anxiety of a predator in a cage. Turn the key. The starter motor doesn't whisper. It whines a high-pitched mechanical complaint before the catch. Then, the rumble. That sound. It is the shibboleth of the cult, a low-frequency thrum that penetrates the firewall and resonates in your chest cavity. They call it the subby rumble, speaking of it in hushed, reverent tones as if it were a deliberate acoustic tuning choice by a master lute. It isn't. It is a mistake. It is the sound of inefficiency. To fit the turbocharger and the steering column into the cramped bay of the early chassis. The engineers had to compromise. The exhaust manifold pipes from the left bank of cylinders are longer than the pipes from the right bank. Unequal length headers. It's bad engineering. It creates back pressure. It creates heat. The pulses of exhaust gas from the cylinders collide and interfere with each other because they arrive at the collector at different times. A Ferrari screams because its exhaust pulses are perfectly timed, a symphony of mathematical precision. This car grumbles because its exhaust pulses are tripping over each other in the dark. You are listening to a mechanical traffic jam, and yet, in the dead of night, with the rain hammering the roof, that rhythmic failure sounds like a heartbeat. It sounds organic. It sounds like something that is struggling to breathe, just like you. You drop the handbrake. The car lurches. It doesn't glide. It claws. The all-wheel drive system is permanent, always engaged. A paranoid mechanism that assumes the ground is about to betray you at any second. And in this weather, it might. The city streets are empty, slick with oil and water. The street lamps flicker, casting long, dancing shadows that hide the car's utilitarian ugliness. Let's be honest, it is ugly. It has the aerodynamic profile of a brick and a hood scoop that looks like a gaping wound. It is not sleek. It is not seductive. It is a blunt instrument. As you accelerate, the nose lifts. The suspension is soft, another relic of its rally-bred dirt road DNA. It dives under braking. It squats under acceleration. It communicates weight transfer with the subtlety of a punch to the gut. You are not insulated from the physics of motion. You are drowning in them. This is the melancholy of the machine. It was built for violence, for gravel sprays, for jumps, for anti-lag explosions that shatter eardrums in Finnish forests. But here it is, trapped in the suburbs, obeying a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, its potential leashed by traffic laws and stop signs. It feels restless. It wants you to do something stupid. You take a corner, a little too fast. A normal car would understeer, pushing wide toward the curb, surrendering to the lack of friction. You feel the slide begin, that sickening sensation of tires unzipping from the pavement. The abyss opens up. But then, the mechanical hand grabs you. The center differential locks up. Power shuffles from the slipping wheels to the gripping ones. It happens faster than you can think. A clumsy analog computer made of gears and viscous fluid, deciding that you are not allowed to die tonight. The nose tucks in. The car pivots. The rumble deepens, turning from an idle murmur to a guttural roar as the unequal pulses merge into a singular shout of defiance. You exit the corner straight and true. Your heart rate spikes, then settles. This is the pact. You tolerate the cheap plastic, the rattling interior, the abysmal fuel economy, and the noise. In exchange, when the world tries to throw you off the edge, the car holds you back. The rain intensifies. The rhythm of the wipers acts as a metronome against the syncopated bass drum of the engine. You are alone. The isolation is total. The glass separates you from the cold, but the machinery connects you to the road with a fidelity that is almost painful. There is no filter here, no electronic numbness, just you and a heavy iron block of stubborn tradition sitting over the front axle. Subaru didn't set out to build a legend. They didn't have the budget for a legend. They built a tractor that could outrun a supercar on a gravel driveway, and they left the edges rough because they couldn't afford to sand them down. They left the headers unequal because they ran out of room. They left the soul in because they didn't have the technology to refine it out. You pull to a stop at a red light that will never turn green because there is no one else around to trigger the sensor. The idle drops. The car shakes, a wet dog shivering in the cold. You listen to the rain. You listen to the rumble. And for a moment, in this cacophony of inefficiencies, you find absolute peace. You look for a soul in the machine. That's what you tell yourself when you turn the key, and that unequal length header rumble vibrates through the floor mat and into the soles of your shoes. You tell yourself that this thrum, this offbeat heart, is character. You convinced yourself that the engineers in Gunma were artisans, sculpting a samurai sword out of steel and aluminum, infusing it with a warrior's spirit. You are lying to yourself. The truth is much colder, much damper, and far less romantic. You aren't sitting inside a passion project. You are sitting inside a desperate gamble made by a company that was trying to figure out how to sell farm equipment to commuters. The Subaru Impreza wasn't born from a desire to dominate the World Rally Championship. It was born because Subaru was broke, confused, and staring into the abyss of irrelevance. Before the gold wheels, before the vape smoke and the flat brim hats, before the blue paint became a cliché, Subaru was a weird little company making weird little cars for people who lived at the end of dirt roads. They were the eccentric uncle of the Japanese automotive industry, while Toyota was building the Camry to conquer the world with beige competence, and Honda was engineering engines that spun like Swiss watches. Subaru was building tractors that happened to have license plates. To understand you have to understand the desperation of Fuji Heavy Industries. They didn't start with cars, they started with aircraft. But after the war, when the sky was taken away from them, they looked at the ground, they looked at the mud. You feel that all-wheel drive system pulling you through a wet corner. You think that's racing technology. It isn't, it's agricultural technology. It was designed so a farmer in Hokkaido could get his produce to market through a snowstorm. The symmetrical all-wheel drive marketing slogan came later. At the start, it was just the necessity of layout. They stuck the transmission directly behind the engine because it was the easiest, cheapest way to package the thing. It wasn't genius. It was geometry. The soul you worship is just a byproduct of necessary inefficiencies. The boxer engine, that flat, wide slab of metal that makes spark plug changes. A nightmare wasn't chosen for its low center of gravity to help you hit an apex. It was chosen because it reduced vibration without heavy counterweights. It was chosen because they were stubborn. It was a relic of aviation thinking applied to a grocery getter. By the early 1990s, this stubbornness was killing them. The Japanese asset price bubble was bursting. The money was drying up. The excess of the 80s, where every manufacturer could afford to build wild concepts, was over. The lights were flickering in the boardroom. Subaru had the legacy. It was a fine car, a respectable car, but it was getting big, and it was getting expensive. They needed volume. They needed something smaller to fight the Corolla and the Civic, but they didn't have the budget to develop a new car from scratch. When you have no money, you don't innovate, you scavenge. This is the origin of the legend. Not a clean sheet of paper, but a pair of scissors. They took the legacy platform, the floor, the suspension mounting points, the drivetrain, and they cut it. They shortened the wheelbase. They chopped the overhangs. They stripped out the luxury. They looked at the parts bin and asked, what is the absolute minimum we need to make a car that moves? The result was the introduced in 1992. It was a profound disappointment to anyone looking for excitement. It was a boring economy sedan. It looked like a bar of soap that had been used for a week. The interior was a sea of hard, grey plastic that smelled like despair and adhesives. The styling was anonymous, bordering on invisible. If you parked it next to a dumpster in the rain, you might accidentally try to unlock the dumpster. You have to appreciate the irony. The chassis was stiff not because they wanted it to handle well on a track, but because they over-engineered it to survive rural roads without rattling apart. The longitudinal engine layout was there because they couldn't afford to develop a transverse system like Honda. All-wheel drive was there because it was their only unique selling point in a market crowded with better, cheaper front-wheel drive cars. They inadvertently built a weapon by shrinking the legacy, but keeping the heavy-duty drivetrain. They had created a car with the footprint of a compact, but the skeleton of a mid-size hauler. It was overbuilt, it was dense, it was heavy for its size, but it was rigid. But don't mistake this for vision. At the launch, nobody at Subaru was high-fiving about rally stages. They were praying they could sell enough of these bland little sedans to keep the electricity on at the factory. They were marketing it to entry-level accountants and safety-conscious librarians. The advertisements didn't show gravel spraying sideways. They showed happy couples avoiding puddles on their way to a picnic. And that is where you find yourself now, gripping the wheel of a descendant of desperation. You love the mechanical feedback, the way the shifter feels like a bolt-action rifle, the way the car communicates the road surface to your palms. You call it driver engagement. Back then, they just called it NVH, noise, vibration, and harshness. They couldn't afford to isolate you from the road, so they let the road in. The connection you feel is simply a lack of refinement. It is the raw, unpolished reality of a machine built on a budget, by a company that was better at making things last than making things comfortable. The Impreza was a blank canvas, not because it was pure, but because they couldn't afford paint. It was a vessel waiting to be filled, and it would be filled violently by a different kind of desperation, the need to win. But in 1992, sitting on the dealer lot in the cold rain, it was just a car. A boring, ugly, weird little car that nobody really wanted. It was the perfect disguise. They call it the Boxer. It's a romantic name for a violent geometry. You like the name because it implies a fighter, a scrappy contender punching above its weight class. But look closer. Open the hood and stare into the abyss of the bay. There is no romance here. There is only a stubborn refusal to conform. A mechanical layout that makes no sense to a modern accountant, and perfect sense to a physicist who has given up on hope. Most engines stand upright, proud, shouting their existence at the sky. They are towers of combustion. But not this one. This one lies flat on its belly, hiding deep in the chassis, like a soldier crawling through the mud to avoid gunfire. It is a design born not of speed, but of packaging. They wanted to fit a spare tire under the hood of a compact car in the 1960s. That is the origin of your legend. You are worshipping a compromise made for a farmer's spare rubber. Asterisk, but accidents have consequences. By flattening the engine, by splaying the pistons out until they oppose each other like duelists in a mirror, Subaru inadvertently stumbled upon a secret that gravity had been keeping to itself. Think about the pendulum. In a standard inline 4 or a V6, the mass is high. When you turn the wheel, that mass wants to tip over. It fights you. It wants to fling you off the road. But you are driving an anchor, because the Boxer lays flat. The center of gravity is dragged down to the asphalt, closer to the road, closer to Hell. When you throw this car into a corner on a wet night, when the tires scream and the physics of momentum try to kill you, the engine acts as a stabilizing weight. It doesn't tip, it pivots. It's the sensation that seduces you, that uncanny lack of body roll. It feels like the car is clawing into the tarmac, gripping the earth with a desperation that mimics your own fear of letting go. You think it's courage. It isn't. It's just mass placement. It's just a heavy metal plate strapped to your ankle so the storm can't blow you away. Asterisk, and inside that flattened block, the violence is symmetrical. In a normal engine, the vibrations are a chaotic noise that engineers must dampen with heavy counterweights. Here, the violence cancels itself out. The left piston punches out, the right piston punches out. They meet in the middle and retreat. Action and reaction. A perfect cancellation of forces. It runs smooth, unnervingly smooth. It allows the engine to spin up with a lack of drama that belies the explosions happening thousands of times a minute. But don't mistake smoothness for perfection. This layout is a nightmare of plumbing and heat. Gravity is a law you cannot bribe, and fluids obey it blindly. When an engine lies flat, oil and coolant pool where they shouldn't. The gaskets, those thin strips of material holding the fire inside, are constantly bathed in corrosive fluids, rotting slowly in the dark. You know the joke. You know the fear. The head gasket failure isn't a possibility. It is a prophecy. It is the tax you pay for that low center of gravity. You trade reliability for the feeling of being planted on the road. A fair trade, perhaps, until you see the white smoke billowing from the exhaust like a surrender flag. Asterisk, and then there is the maintenance. The punishment for your loyalty. To change the spark plugs on a normal car is a 10-minute job. A casual Sunday morning. On the Boxer, it is a penance. The cylinder heads are shoved against the frame rails, mere millimeters of clearance. You have to twist your hands into shapes human bone was not meant to take. You scrape your knuckles against the cold steel of the chassis until they bleed. You curse the engineers and gunmen. You wonder why they built a cage around the heart of the machine. You are alone in the garage, the singular bulb flickering overhead, wrenching a bolt you cannot see, only feel. This is the intimacy of the Boxer. It demands your blood. It demands that you suffer for the privilege of its balance. It is a stubborn, difficult, inconvenient thing. It is obsolete technology kept alive by a cult of personality. Other manufacturers abandoned the flat 4 decades ago. Porsche keeps it for tradition. Subaru keeps it because they don't know how to be anything else. Asterisk, so why do you do it? Why do you drive this obsolete farm implement? Because of the sound, that rumble. You tell your friends it's the sound of power. You're lying. It's the sound of inefficiency. It comes from unequal length exhaust headers, one pipe longer than the other, causing the exhaust pulses to clash and tumble over each other, creating that syncopated, offbeat thud. It is literally the sound of the engine struggling to breathe. Efficiency demands equal length. Silence demands symmetry. But you want the struggle. You want the arrhythmia. On a rainy Tuesday, when the streetlights smear across your windshield like oil paint, you turn the key. The starter winds a unique, high-pitched pliant, then it catches. Brum brum brum. It shakes the chassis gently. It feels alive because it is flawed. A perfect electric motor has no soul because it has no struggle. The Boxer engine is nothing but struggle. It fights gravity. It fights its own packaging. It fights the air trying to escape its lungs. And in that fight, in that vibrating, leaking, difficult mess of aluminum, you find a reflection of yourself. Not a hero, just something trying to keep its center of gravity low enough to survive the turn. Asterisk. You remember the colors before you remember the shape. That specific, bruised shade of blue. The gold wheels that looked less like jewelry and more like industrial brass fittings. It's an iconic livery now, plastered on bedroom walls and video game covers, worshipped as the holy vestments of speed. But you know the truth. You know it wasn't an artistic choice born of passion. It was a cigarette ad. 555 tobacco. That is the foundation of your nostalgia. A corporate contract to sell lung cancer, painted onto a compact sedan designed to haul groceries in snowy PREFECTURES. By the early 90s, the Subaru legacy, that heavy, lumbering barge, had done its job. It had proved the all-wheel drive system worked. But physics is a cruel legislator, and it demanded something smaller. Subaru didn't have a sports car. They had a budget economy box, a rhetorical shrug in steel form. It was narrow, upright, and possessed all the aerodynamic grace of a brick dropped into a pond. But in the hands of the British motorsport engineering firm, this utilitarian dullness became a canvas for violence. They looked at this boring Japanese sedan and saw a container for stress. They didn't add grace, they added trauma. They stiffened the chassis until it stopped flexing and started snapping. They took the agricultural transmission and hardened it until shifting gears felt like loading a bolt-action rifle. This was the Group A era. The rules were strict, which meant the engineers had to be devious. The car you see sliding through the mud on those old tapes isn't floating. It is clawing. The all-wheel drive system wasn't clever in the modern sense. It didn't have computers thinking for you. It was mechanical friction, gears mashing against gears, differentials locking up in a panic, trying to find traction on surfaces that offered none. And then there was the engine, the EJ20, the Boxer. Enthusiasts will tell you about the low center of gravity, reciting the marketing brochures like gospel, but you know the reality. The flat engine was a relic of aviation history that Subaru was too stubborn to abandon. It was wide. It made packaging the exhaust a nightmare. That rumble, the Subaru rumble that echoes off the canyon walls at 2 a.m., that isn't a performance feature. It's a symptom of inefficiency. Because the engine was so wide, the exhaust headers had to be on equal lengths to clear the suspension components. The exhaust pulses collided with each other, creating turbulence. You are listening to an engine tripping over its own feet. And yet, In the silence of a rainy night, that offbeat thrum sounds remarkably like a human heartbeat, irregular, anxious, alive. A machine is only as good as the person willing to abuse it. Enter Colin McRae, a Scotsman who didn't drive the Impreza so much as he assaulted the terrain with it. Mick Ray didn't believe in the smooth line. He didn't believe in preserving the equipment. He drove with a philosophy of absolute nihilism. If in doubt, flat out. It sounds heroic until you unpack it. It means that when you are terrified, when you have lost control, when the abyss is staring at you through the windshield, you do not retreat. You accelerate. You surrender your agency to the momentum. The footage from this era looks like surveillance tape from a crime scene. Grainy, shaking, washed out. You see the blue and gold blur tearing through the forests of Finland or the mud of Wales. It doesn't look elegant. It looks like a car crash that hasn't finished happening yet. The Impreza 555 didn't dance. It wrestled. It was a barroom brawl on wheels. This violence needed a badge. It needed to be sold to you, the commuter, the office worker, the person whose most dangerous daily maneuver is merging onto the freeway. So, Subaru Technica International ST. I stepped out of the shadows. They took the homologation requirements, the rules that said you must build 2,500 of these for the public to race them, and they turned them into a myth. The WRX STI. They gave you the big wing, not because you needed downforce at 30 miles per hour in a school zone, but because you needed to feel like you were part of the violence. They gave you the pink badge, cherry blossom red, they called it, a warrior's color in Japan, implying a short, glorious life, a poetic way of saying your head gaskets might blow before the warranty expires. They sold you a car that was fundamentally compromised. The suspension was too hard for the street. The turbolag was a cavernous pause between your foot moving and the car, reacting a moment of hesitation where you wondered if the engine had died, followed by a sudden, spinal compressing shove. It was terrible. It was perfect. You buy this car because you are lonely. That is the cynical truth. You don't buy a Camry to feel something. You buy it to forget the commute. You buy the Impreza, the STI with the gold wheels, because you want the commute to fight back. You want the vibration in the steering wheel. You want the whine of the straight-cut gears. You want to feel the mechanical grip, that sensation of 4 tires biting into the asphalt, mimicking the feeling of a hand grabbing your collar and pulling you back from the ledge. The legend of the gold and blue isn't about winning championships. It's about a farm tool that learned to kill. It's about the realization that the most soulful machines are the ones that are flawed, difficult, and built by people who refuse to do things the easy way. When you drive it now, years later, the plastic interior rattles. The wind noise is deafening. It smells of unburnt fuel and old oil. But when you look out over that hood scoop, watching the rain shatter against the paint, you aren't just a driver in traffic. You are a participant in a very loud, very fast tragedy, and for a moment, in the solitude of the drive, you aren't alone. You think you remember the mud. You think your nostalgia is rooted in the forests of Wales or the gravel of the Acropolis, watching a blue blur tear through the scenery like a violent insect. But that's a lie you tell yourself to give your obsession pedigree. The truth is, you didn't fall in love with the Impreza on a rally stage. You fell in love with it in a bedroom, illuminated by the radioactive glow of a cathode ray tube television. You fell in love with a collection of polygons. The legend of the Subaru Impreza wasn't cemented by engineering triumphs or the smell of burning clutch. It was cemented by Gran Turismo. It was the great digitization of desire. For a generation of latchkey kids and insomniacs, the WRX wasn't a car you drove to work. It was the weapon you chose to beat a license test at 2 a.m. while the rest of the house slept. This is where the cynicism of the machine dissolves into the naivety of the user. You were sold a fantasy of accessibility. Ferrari and Lamborghini were posters on the wall, untouchable gods of Italian arrogance. But the Subaru was a sedan. It had 4 doors. It looked like something your geography teacher might drive if he had a midlife crisis. It was the attainable hero. And that is the cruelest marketing trick of all, because when you finally grew up, got the job, and bought the car, you realized the digital ghost didn't have rattles. The digital ghost didn't suffer from Ringland failure. The digital ghost didn't understeer when the tires got cold. You bought the farm implement expecting the fighter jet, only to find out that the soul everyone talks about is just the vibration of a boxer engine, trying to tear itself out of its mounts because the firing order is inherently fighting physics. But you forgave it. You forgave the cheap plastic of the dashboard that cracked under the sun. You forgave the transmission that felt like stirring a bucket of bolts. You forgave it because of a number, 555, State Express 555, a cigarette brand. That is the irony at the heart of your religion. The iconic blue and gold livery, the colors that define an entire subculture of automotive enthusiasm, are a billboard for lung cancer. You are worshipping a nicotine advertisement painted onto an economy car. Yet, from this commercial cynicism, a holy grail emerged. The 2 to be. If the standard WRX is the farmhand, the 2 to be is the violence of the rally stage distilled into a road-legal format. Wide fenders that look like swollen bruises, a wing that serves no purpose in rush-hour traffic other than to scream at the sky. It was a homologation special, a term engineers use to justify building something that makes no financial sense. They only made 400 of them for Japan, a handful for the rest of the world. It became the Phantom, the car you saw in magazines but never on the street. It represents the peak of the analog era before traction control became a nanny. Before electric steering severed the connection between your fingertips and the asphalt. The 2 to be is the ultimate expression of the lie that a machine can have a spirit. It doesn't. It just has perfect, terrifying mechanical grip. So, who drives them now? The 2 to be is locked away in climate-controlled dungeons, traded like fine art by men who will never let the turbo spool. But the children of the 555, the WRXs and STs of the world, they belong to the outcasts. Look at the meets in the parking lots of abandoned malls, the flat-built caps, the clouds of vape smoke, the hoodies pulled up against the cold. It's easy to mock them. It's easy to look at the lowered suspension, the oversized exhaust tips, and the neon underglow and see bad taste. But look closer. Look at the solitude. These are people trying to build an identity out of bolt-on parts. The tuner culture isn't about performance. If it were, they'd buy faster cars. It's about agency. When your life feels out of control, when the job is a dead end, when the rent is too high, when the world feels like it's leaving you behind, you can go into the garage. You can take a wrench to a bolt. You can change the intake. You can make the car louder. You modify the machine to prove you exist. The subby rumble, that distinct burbling exhaust note, is technically an inefficiency caused by unequal length exhaust headers. It creates heat. It is bad engineering, but you love it. You amplify it, because when you are driving alone at 3 a.m. and the rain is slicking the asphalt, that sound is the only thing talking back to you. The all-wheel drive system doesn't care if you are lonely. It doesn't care if you are broken. It simply does its job. It shifts torque from the wheels that slip to the wheels that grip. It mimics a human hand holding you back from the abyss, correcting your mistakes before you even know you made them. There is a peace in that mechanical intervention. The car saves you over and over again. The cult of 555 isn't about rally wins anymore. Those trophies are rusting in a warehouse in Gunma. The cult is about the tribe. It's the wave you give to another hood-scooped sedan in traffic, a silent acknowledgement of shared suffering. You both know the head gaskets are a ticking time bomb. You both know the fuel economy is atrocious. You both know the interior rattles like a maraca. But you also know the feeling of the turbo kicking in on a wet on-ramp. You know the sensation of the car pivoting around your hips. You know that for a brief moment, the farm implement becomes the hero. And you, by extension, are the pilot of something important. The gold wheels are gaudy. The blue paint is loud. But in the grey monochrome of modern traffic, in the endless sea of silver crossovers and silent electric pods, the Impreza is a refusal to go quietly. It is a stubborn, inefficient, beautiful relic, a machine built for violence that found a second life, providing comfort to the restless. You remember when the steering wheel used to bite back? There was a time when the connection between your palms and the asphalt was violent, a direct line of communication interrupted only by the frantic shudder of a hydraulic pump fighting to keep up with your desperation. The old chassis, the GC, the early GD, they were tin cans, thin metal, thin glass, zero insulation. You were inside the explosion. You were part of the mechanism. But time is a jagged edge that smooths everything down eventually. And you, the driver, you got older. Your back started to ache. You started worrying about side impact ratings and curtain airbags. You stopped wanting a rally car and started wanting a commute. And Subaru, in their infinite accidental wisdom, listened. They didn't build the legend on purpose, so they had no qualms about dismantling it on purpose. It began slowly, the softening. It wasn't a sudden betrayal, but a gradual layering of insulation. The metal grew thicker, the pillars grew wider, blocking your view of the apex but promising that if you rolled into a ditch, the roof wouldn't collapse on your head. A fair trade, the actuaries said. A necessary evolution, the engineers claimed. The car gained weight. It wasn't just physical mass, it was spiritual heaviness. The frantic, nervous energy of the lightweight fighter was replaced by the dure competence of a middle manager. The suspension stopped crashing over bumps and began absorbing them. The road noise, that constant white noise roar that used to signify speed, was suffocated behind layers of sound-deadening foam. You pressed the throttle now, and there is a hesitation, a digital handshake between the pedal and the engine. The cable is gone. The physical link is severed. The computer asks the engine if it's okay to accelerate, checks the emission, checks the traction control, and then, only then, delivers a sanitized version of the power you asked for. For the purist, this was the final nail. The hatch was the utility of the farm implement. It was the shape that said, "I have work to do." It could carry dogs, lumber, spare tires, and groceries, all while tearing through a gravel stage. It was ugly, squat, and perfect, but the market research came back from the suburbs. The Americans wanted trunks. They wanted sedans. They wanted to look like they worked in an office, not a garage. So the shape was stretched, elongated, and normalized. The aggressive, hunched posture of the rally car was ironed out into a generic silhouette that could blend into a rental car lot without raising a pulse. You walk around the back of the modern chassis. It's handsome, perhaps, sharp angles, LED diffusers that diffuse nothing, but it lacks the honesty of the box. It lacks the utility that excused the ugliness. Now, it's just a car. It's just traffic. The greatest theft, however, was the sound. We talked about the rumble, that uneven burbling heartbeat of the unequal length headers. It was a flaw. It was exhaust pulses colliding with each other because the piping wasn't optimized. It was inefficient. Efficiency is the enemy of character. As the years ticked by, the engineers fixed the flaw. They equalized the headers. They installed twin-scroll turbos for better low-end torque. They made the engine better, objectively, in every measurable metric, and in doing so, they silenced the ghost. The boxer engine, once a snarling animal, became a sewing machine, a hum, a drone. You sit at a stoplight now, and the car doesn't shake. The gear lever doesn't vibrate in your hand like a nervous living thing. It sits there, plastic and cold. The car is no longer mimicking a human hand holding you back from the abyss. It is a padded room keeping you safe from yourself. You drive through the rain now, and the wipers are silent. The climate control is automatic. The heated seats lull you into a stupor. The all-wheel drive system is still there, beneath the floorboards, smarter than ever. It vectors torque with mathematical precision. It creates grip where there should be none, but you don't feel it. You trust it, but you don't feel it. The machine has been civilized. The tractor has been paved over. The Impreza, once a weapon of choice for the reckless and the brave, has become a sensible choice for the risk-averse. That it is a better car. It will last longer. It will protect you. It will get you to work on time. But as you turn the engine off and the digital dashboard fades to black, you realize the silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's just empty. The melancholy remains, but the romance is gone. You are safe, and you are bored. You remember when the steering wheel used to bite back. There was a time when the connection between your palms and the asphalt was violent, a direct line of communication interrupted only by the frantic shudder of a hydraulic pump fighting to keep up with your desperation. The old chassis, the GC, the early GD, they were tin cans. Thin metal, thin glass, zero insulation. You were inside the explosion. You were part of the mechanism. But time is a jagged edge that smooths everything down eventually. And you, the driver, you got older. Your back started to ache. You started worrying about side impact ratings and curtain airbags. You stopped wanting a rally car and started wanting a commute. And Subaru, in their infinite, accidental wisdom, listened. They didn't build the legend on purpose, so they had no qualms about dismantling it on purpose. It began slowly. The softening, it wasn't a sudden betrayal, but a gradual layering of insulation. The metal grew thicker, the pillars grew wider, blocking your view of the apex but promising that if you rolled into a ditch, the roof wouldn't collapse on your head. A fair trade, the actuaries said. a necessary evolution. The engineers claimed the car gained weight. It wasn't just physical mass, it was spiritual heaviness. The frantic nervous energy of the lightweight fighter was replaced by the dure competence of a middle manager. The suspension stopped crashing over bumps and began absorbing them. The road noise, that constant white noise roar that used to signify speed, was suffocated behind layers of sound-deadening foam. You press the throttle now, and there is a hesitation, a digital handshake between the pedal and the engine. The cable is gone. The physical link is severed. The computer asks the engine if it's okay to accelerate, checks the emissions, checks the traction control, and then, only then, delivers a sanitized version of the power you asked for. Asterisk, for the purist, this was the final nail. The hatch was the utility of the farm implement. It was the shape that said, I have work to do. It could carry dogs, lumber, spare tires, and groceries, all while tearing through a gravel stage. It was ugly, squat, and perfect. But the market research came back from the suburbs. The Americans wanted trunks. They wanted sedans. They wanted to look like they worked in an office, not a garage. So the shape was stretched, elongated, and normalized. The aggressive, hunched posture of the rally car was ironed out into a generic silhouette that could blend into a rental car lot without raising a pulse. You walk around the back of the modern chassis. It's handsome, perhaps. Sharp angles, lead diffusers that diffuse nothing. But it lacks the honesty of the box. It lacks the utility that excused the ugliness. Now, it's just a car. It's just traffic. Asterisk. The greatest theft, however, was the sound. We talked about the rumble, that uneven, burbling heartbeat of the unequal length headers. It was a flaw. It was exhaust pulses colliding with each other because the piping wasn't optimized. It was inefficient. Efficiency is the enemy of character. As the years ticked by, the engineers fixed the flaw. They equalized the headers. They installed twin-scrolled turbos for better low-end torque. They made the engine better, objectively, in every measurable metric. And in doing so, they silenced the ghost. The boxer engine, once a snarling animal, became a sewing machine, a hum, a drone. You sit at a stoplight now, and the car doesn't shake. The gear lever doesn't vibrate in your hand like a nervous living thing. It sits there, plastic and cold. The car is no longer mimicking a human hand holding you back from the abyss. It is a padded room keeping you safe from yourself. Asterisk, you drive through the rain now, and the wipers are silent. The climate control is automatic. The heated seats lull you into a stupor. The all-wheel drive system is still there, beneath the floorboards, smarter than ever. It vectors torque with mathematical precision. It creates grip where there should be none, but you don't feel it. You trust it, but you don't feel it. The machine has been civilized. The tractor has been paved over. The Impreza, once a weapon of choice for the reckless and the brave, has become a sensible choice for the risk-averse. It is a better car. It will last longer. It will protect you. It will get you to work on time. But as you turn the engine off and the digital dashboard fades to black, you realize the silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's just empty. The melancholy remains, but the romance is gone. You are safe, and you are bored. Asterisk, the rain hits the windshield differently when you know it's the end of the line. It doesn't bead. It smears, distorted by the streetlights of a city that has long since stopped caring about what you drive. You are sitting at a red light, the idle rough, the cabin vibrating with that offbeat rhythm that sounds like a heartbeat skipping. This is the melancholy of a machine, built for violence finding peace in the rain. You are alone. The solitude of the night drive is the only church left for the internal combustion engine. You feel the mechanical grip of the all-wheel drive system through the floorboards, a sensation of heaviness, of friction, of drag. It mimics a human hand holding you back from the abyss, a frantic mechanical desperation to keep you on the road when physics suggests you should be in the ditch. But let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. You aren't driving a legend. You are driving a mistake that happened to work. Asterisk, we have spent this long journey romanticizing a farm implement. That is the cynical truth at the bottom of the oil pan. Subaru didn't build a legend on purpose. They built a tractor for the road that happened to go fast because they were too stubborn to change their engineering layout. The soul enthusiasts worshipped that famous rumble. The burble that echoes off tunnel walls is just a byproduct of necessary inefficiencies. It is the sound of unequal length headers, a plumbing problem caused by a flat engine layout dictated by tradition, not innovation. It is thermal inefficiency screaming to be heard. And yet, you love it. You love it because it is flawed. You love it because it requires your forgiveness. But the modern world does not tolerate flaws. It demands the silent, linear torque of the electric motor. The electric future is a high-speed elevator. It moves you from point A to point B without drama, without vibration, without the smell of unburned hydrocarbons. It is perfect, and it is utterly, devastatingly boring. Asterisk, the Impreza isn't dead. Strictly speaking, you can still walk into a showroom and buy a car with that name on the trunk. But look at it, really look at it. It has grown soft. It has grown capable, safe, and numb. It has been sanitized for your protection. The hood scoop is gone on the base models. The rough edges filed down by wind, tunnels and safety regulators. The separation of the WRX from the Impreza lineage was the final nail. It was a corporate divorce that left the children confused. The spirit we chased through the gravel of the 90s, the spirit that smelled of burning clutches and cheap plastic interiors, has left the building. What you are holding on to, gripping that worn leather steering wheel, is a relic. You are the curator of a museum of noise. The new cars talk to satellites. Your car talks to the road, and mostly, it complains. It complains about the cold start. It complains about the tarmac quality. It vibrates your spine to let you know that the differentials are working. It is a constant, tactile reminder of entropy. Asterisk, why do we cling to this? Why do you spend your nights chasing parts on auction sites for a chassis that rusts if you look at it wrong? Because the electric future offers no resistance. There is no struggle in a battery. It just gives. The Impreza, specifically the turbocharged ghosts of the past, makes you work for it. The turbo lag, that agonizing second of nothingness before the boost hits, is a narrative arc. It is tension and release. It is a story told in air pressure and fuel mixture. Without that lag, without that struggle, there is no joy in the acceleration. There is only velocity, and velocity without sensation is just data. We are drowning in data. We are starving for feeling. You drive these cars because they are mortal. They break, they leak, they consume. They are dying from the moment they roll off the line, just like you. An electric car feels like an appliance that will last forever until the software is unsupported. An EJ20 engine feels like a living thing that is slowly killing itself to please you. Asterisk, so, pull into the garage. Turn the key. The silence that follows is heavy. It rings in your ears, but listen closely. There it is. The tick-tick-tick of cooling metal, the exhaust contracting, the smell of hot oil and ozone. The car is settling. It is resting. This is the funeral dirge of the analog age, played out in a suburban garage. We hold on to these mechanical relics, not because they are better objectively, they are worse in every measurable metric, but because they need us. A Tesla doesn't need you to check its oil. It doesn't need you to listen for a vacuum leak. It doesn't need you at all. The Impreza was a farm tool that learned to fly, and in doing so, it became the perfect vessel for our own inadequacies. It is ugly, it is loud, and it is beautiful because it is honest. Step out of the car, turn off the garage light. In the darkness, the silhouette remains, a stubborn wedge of steel against the inevitable void. The spirit is dead. Long lived the machine.